They say money can buy almost anything. But in the early hours of April 15th, 1912, when the Titanic slipped beneath the freezing waters of the North Atlantic, money could not buy survival. In fact, some of the richest and most powerful men in the world went down with the ship, their fortunes and their influence powerless against physics, human error, and the arrogance of an age that believed progress had conquered nature. They had wealth that could move markets, shape governments, and finance empires. Yet, in those few desperate hours, what mattered was not gold, nor stocks, nor estates, but space in a lifeboat, and most of them never got one. The Titanic disaster has been told so many times that we think we know it. An iceberg, an unsinkable ship, a tragic loss of life. But what makes this story more than a maritime tragedy is the financial dimension. The men who died on that ship were not just passengers. They were the custodians of immense capital, the financiers of railroads, steel, banking, and international trade. Their deaths were not just personal losses. They represented the collapse of dynasties, the sudden transfer of wealth, and the reshaping of financial systems in Britain and America at a time when money and power were tightly interwoven. Let's begin with John Jacob Astor IV. At 47 years old, Astor was one of the wealthiest men alive. His fortune, derived from real estate, hotels, and inheritance from America's legendary Astor dynasty, was estimated at more than $87 million in 1912. Adjusted for inflation, that translates to billions today, a sum that could buy entire corporations outright. He had financed libraries, hotels, and grand mansions. He had married a young socialite, Madeline Force, just months before the voyage, causing scandal because she was nearly 30 years younger. The Titanic was their honeymoon trip home. Astor could have tried to force his way into a lifeboat. Many wealthy men did not hesitate, but eyewitnesses recalled him helping his wife into one and then stepping back, resigned. He asked if he could join her because she was pregnant. The crew refused. Wealth, power, status, none of it mattered in that moment. He was last seen smoking a cigarette on the deck, moments before the ocean claimed him. His fortune passed to his unborn child. His death was more than personal tragedy. It was the abrupt transfer of one of America's largest estates. Then there was Benjamin Guggenheim, heir to the Guggenheim mining fortune. A playboy, a man of immense indulgence, he was traveling with his mistress, Leontine Barr. When the collision came, Guggenheim initially tried to take it lightly. But as the reality of the sinking became clear, he made a decision that has since passed into legend. He changed into evening clothes and reportedly told his steward, "We've dressed up in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." His mistress survived in a lifeboat. He did not. His death was symbolic of an old-world attitude among the elite, the idea that dignity and reputation, even at the cost of life, defined a man's legacy. But history is cold. What remained were the financial ripples, shifts in the Guggenheim family empire, a tightening of control by his relatives, and the recognition that even dynasties built on industrial power could be decapitated in a single night. Another powerful figure aboard was Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's department store in New York. Straus was not just wealthy. He was influential, a former congressman, a philanthropist, a public figure. He and his wife Ida were offered seats on lifeboats. She refused. "We have lived together for many years," she said, "and where you go, I go." They died side by side on the Titanic. The Straus fortune survived, passed on to their heirs, but the symbolism was profound. Here was the American retail magnate, one of the richest merchants of his age, undone not by competition, not by financial mistakes, but by ice in the night. His death revealed something that no balance sheet could hide, that wealth insulated, but it did not make one immortal. The roster goes on. George Widener, heir to a Philadelphia Transit fortune, perished. Harry Elkins Widener, his bibliophile son, drowned with him. Their loss altered the trajectory of one of America's great families, redirecting fortunes, reshaping trusts, and even resulting in the construction of Harvard's Widener Library, a monument born of tragedy. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, perished, leaving behind questions of hubris and negligence. But in terms of raw wealth, it was the deaths of men like Astor, Guggenheim, Straus, and Widener that truly shook society. They were not only symbols of privilege, they were pillars of a financial system that ran on inheritance, connections, and industrial capital. To understand the Titanic fully, you must place it in its economic history. The year 1912 sat on the edge of cataclysm. The world was basking in the illusion of stability. The British Empire dominated trade, America was rising as an industrial giant, and the wealthy elite lived in a bubble of opulence. Their palaces in Newport, Rhode Island, their estates in London, their private rail cars, they embodied an age historians call the Gilded Age, though by 1912 it was already waning. Just 2 years later, the First World War would explode and tear the old order apart. But in that spring, when the Titanic sailed from Southampton, it was the last gasp of that high aristocratic confidence. The ship itself was a monument to this mindset. It was marketed as unsinkable. Its first-class accommodations were palaces afloat, suites designed for men like Astor and Guggenheim. Tickets for the most luxurious cabins cost the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars today. These men were not simply traveling, they were demonstrating status, wealth, and the power of capital. And yet, when the iceberg ripped the hull open, the financial system of privilege collapsed into cold mathematics. There were only enough lifeboats for about half the passengers. No amount of influence could change that equation. When the Titanic sank, it was not only bodies that disappeared beneath the water, but also the stability of financial empires. The deaths of men like John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, and George Widener meant abrupt changes in inheritance, sudden shifts of capital, and even the birth of new philanthropic institutions. Inheritance law was tested in unprecedented ways, as widows, children, and trusts became the custodians of unimaginable wealth. In a sense, the Titanic was not just the end of lives, it was the forced redistribution of some of the largest fortunes in the world. Consider Astor's death. He left behind a fortune so vast that newspapers struggled to estimate its true size. Reports at the time put it at around $87 million, though the real figure may have been higher. His unborn son, John Jacob Astor VI, instantly became one of the richest children on earth. But this sudden inheritance also fractured the Astor family. Madeline, his young widow, was entitled to a substantial portion, but faced years of public scrutiny. The fortune, once concentrated in the hands of a single patriarch, became divided, reshaped by trusts, and consumed by legal wrangling. A dynasty that had seemed unshakable was now vulnerable to the same forces that destabilize all wealth: succession disputes, public scandal, and the passage of time. The Guggenheim fortune endured, but Benjamin Guggenheim's death accelerated its consolidation under his brothers. His flamboyant lifestyle had drained millions, and his loss in the icy Atlantic meant less risk of dissipation through playboy indulgence. His family doubled down on control, focusing on industrial holdings that would fuel the family's power for decades. In a strange way, his death preserved the core of the fortune by cutting off his excesses. Economic history is full of similar cases, where the death of an heir or patriarch changes the destiny of a fortune, sometimes preserving it, sometimes shattering it. The Widener family's loss was transformative. George Widener and his son Harry were both aboard. George, a wealthy industrialist, died. Harry, a Harvard graduate and rare book collector, also perished. In their memory, Eleanor Widener, the matriarch, donated millions to Harvard to build the Widener Library, one of the greatest research libraries in the world. Out of financial tragedy came a cultural monument. But the point is clear. Fortunes never simply vanish. They are redirected, reshaped, repurposed, often in ways that outlast the men who earned or inherited them. And yet, beyond the families, the Titanic revealed something more fundamental about the financial system. It showed that wealth has limits, that privilege can be rendered meaningless by physical reality. First-class passengers had higher survival rates than third-class. Money did buy better access to lifeboats. But even among the rich, death was not avoidable. The richest man on the ship drowned alongside the poorest immigrant. Money and power created probabilities, not certainties. And that is the truth of every financial system. It can give advantage, but it cannot abolish risk. Now think about what this means for us today. The Titanic sailed in 1912, but its story mirrors the fragility of our financial world. The ship was marketed as unsinkable, just as markets are often treated as invincible. Investors in 2008 were told that housing prices could never fall. Crypto advocates in 2021 insisted Bitcoin could never crash. Before the Great Depression, economists declared that prosperity was permanent. Each time, society believed the system had transcended risk. Each time, reality proved otherwise. The iceberg always comes. The Titanic also illustrates another timeless truth. Wealth concentration does not guarantee survival. Today, billionaires build underground bunkers, invest in private islands, and talk about escaping to Mars. But history suggests that no matter how much money you have, the system you rely on can fail you. If the grid collapses, if the climate crisis accelerates, if financial markets seize up, the rich may buy more time, but they cannot buy immunity. Just as Astor's billions could not secure him a place in a lifeboat, modern fortunes may prove useless in the face of systemic collapse. And yet, here lies the paradox. While money cannot prevent catastrophe, it determines who suffers first and who suffers least. On the Titanic, third-class passengers were locked behind gates, funneled through narrow stairwells, and given lower survival odds. Their poverty was a sentence. Today, financial inequality plays the same role. In a global crisis, inflation, pandemics, climate disasters, the poor are always the first to drown. The rich may eventually fall too, but not before the vulnerable are sacrificed. Economic history is, in many ways, the record of who gets the lifeboats and who does not. So what do we learn from the Titanic? First, that wealth must never blind us to risk. Confidence in the unsinkable is always dangerous. The financial system, the stock market, the housing sector, even entire empires, they can all go down faster than anyone expects. Second, that fortunes are fragile. No matter how powerful, no dynasty is immune to sudden transfer, legal battles, or decay. Third, that survival in crisis depends less on status and more on preparation. The men who survived the Titanic were not always the richest, but often those who acted fastest, made rational decisions, or simply had luck on their side. For you, the viewer, the lesson is personal. Financial education is not just about making money. It is about understanding risk, protecting yourself from overconfidence, and building real wealth that can endure shocks. The Titanic shows us that the financial system is not a guarantee of safety. It is a tool, powerful but limited. If you understand that, you can navigate crises with clear eyes, while others sink in denial. Economic history is not abstract. It is the blueprint of human folly and resilience. The Titanic was one ship, one night, one iceberg. But it is also every economic bubble, every global crisis, every collapse of overconfidence. It is tulip mania, the South Sea bubble, the crash of 1929, the meltdown of 2008, and the inevitable shocks still to come. In each case, the rich thought they were safe. In each case, the system failed them. And in each case, those who understood history saw the warning signs earlier than the rest. The Titanic reminds us of something else: legacy. The rich men who died did not take their money with them. Their wealth was transferred, reshaped, repurposed. And that is the truth of money itself. It is not permanent. It is not eternal. It is a tool we hold temporarily before passing it on. The question is not how much you have, but how well you use it while you do. So remember this: history does not repeat, but it does echo. The Titanic echoes every time someone declares the financial system indestructible. It echoes every time wealth is concentrated in too few hands. It echoes every time society forgets that risk cannot be abolished. And unless we learn, it will echo again, with consequences just as devastating. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look. And I'll